On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to Life Science Success Podcast. My name is Don, and today we're going to be talking about technology for bone healing. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a consultant in life sciences. I help customers manage complexity and increase performance. Today I'm joined by Jason Winder. He's the CEO of Sonogen Medical. Sonogen Medical is a company that has developed a novel technology for ultrasonic bone fracture healing. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, Don, glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. So can you tell listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I live in the Washington, D.C. area with my long-suffering wife, Sharon. I play blues guitar. I love to cook. I speak a few languages, and we both really enjoy travel. My golf game is absolutely terrible, but I suppose it's nice to get out every now and again.
Yeah, I unfortunately right now in Colorado, it's getting into that season where I start to lose more and more golf balls. So I'm right there with you. What languages do you speak?
I'm fluent in French, and I'm roughly conversational in German, Dutch, Spanish, and I can get by in Italian and Portuguese if I absolutely have to.
Oh, very nice. It definitely would come in handy, especially considering that you like to travel. So it's a great thing to have whenever you can, occasionally converse in the local language.
Yeah, my wife and I spent about a decade living in Brussels and working, and so we would take every opportunity to just get out and about. And it was nice to be able to just roll in to another country, sometimes within even just an hour or so, by car or train, and we took full advantage of that. So that was a nice part of that area.
One of my favorite things in Brussels is to sit outside at one of the cafes with beer and a bucket of mussels. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, talking my language.
Yeah. So you've had a career that's focused on cybersecurity, software, and big data. And then you're also the founder and CTO of a cybersecurity company. Can you tell us just a little bit about what did you do in that part of your career and journey?
Yeah, sure. That's Airstone. Airstone, which I founded back in 2003, is today just one of 5 companies in the world certified by the National Security Agency for vulnerability assessment work. They do a ton of security assessment work for the U.S. government, the military, and U.S. intelligence community, as well as for a number of Fortune 100 companies and a few international institutions. That was a lot of fun. Cybersecurity is obviously very current and challenging. I did it for a very, very long time, and honestly, I'm sort of excited for the pivot.
Yeah, the one thing that I've heard with the war in Ukraine with the pharma companies that I work with as well is just that heightened level of just sort of need for security oversight and just making sure that we're all sort of being aware kind of the fact that the cyber warfare doesn't just happen in other countries or at other companies. It could actually be happening right in your own company, and you just might not know it yet.
Yep, a lot of people have an impression that this is a government to government thing, and that everyone's after like the nuclear launch codes. The real target is actually industrial secrets, and by some estimates, the United States has lost, depending on who you ask, anywhere between $1 to $4 trillion in value due to espionage over the last 15 to 20 years. So it's a very real problem, and it's not just intel spy stuff. It actually has actual effects, and medical companies are a massive target given the high value of pharmaceuticals and device technology.
Yeah, and so now you're at Sonogen. You're the CEO there. What can you tell us about Sonogen? What are you guys working on?
Well, Sonogen is a medical devices startup. It's absolutely completely separate from the cybersecurity business. I know that seems like an interesting career change, but my father is actually one of the leading experts in the world in medical ultrasound. Sonogen is actually working to commercialize some next generation technology that he's developed that ultimately uses low intensity pulsed ultrasound for bone fracture healing. So, very excited to try to bring that technology to market.
Yeah, I noticed that in as I was doing research for the show, I read your IEEE paper and saw your father's name on there as well, and you just wanted to explore a little bit more of that tie. So, in terms of his background and his career, I guess what are the primary where his primary focus been, and what are some of the things that he's worked on up till now?
Oh gosh, well he spent the first half of his career actually working in undersea warfare. He was doing anti-submarine work, mostly classified programs for the U.S. Navy for the first 20 years or so of his career, and then ultimately pivoted to medical applications of ultrasound in the early 90s, which was really the first ultrasound-based bone fracture healing device finally made it to market here in the United States. So he's had a very interesting career and brings a lot of really fascinating background and experience to the table that I dare say is rather unique in our space.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does sound interesting. Where primarily um, would this technology be used? What would the patient look like that would need something like this? And is it something that if I go and all of a sudden there's I've somehow fractured an arm or a leg or something, is this something that you're envisioning would eventually be used on anybody that has even a basic level fracture, or is it specifically for only for certain types of patients that you envision this eventually making it to market for?
Well, the good news is that more than 90% of people who suffer a fracture heal just fine on their own. Most people are amply healthy, and the fracture heals without a specific intervention beyond maybe stabilization and casting and things of that nature. There is about 40% of the population that has some sort of vascular insufficiency due to a comorbidity like diabetes or osteoporosis, osteopenia. Even people who are cigarette smokers or just of advanced age might find themselves at increased risk of a so-called delayed or non-union fracture. And for those 8 to 10% that suffer a delayed or non-union fracture, osteopaths typically prescribe some kind of bone growth stimulation device, and there are a few technologies in the field that are used to try to stimulate the fracture to just heal naturally on its own, so that we can avoid risky and also costly surgeries.
Okay. And so when was the company founded? When did you get started?
We've been in business formally since early 2020. However, we've been working on building a prototype of our device and conducting early animal trials, proof of concept studies, going back as far as late 2017. So we're relatively new, but we already have some good data behind us, and so far 3 patents pending on our technology.
So then the good natural question is, where are you currently in terms of product development?
Well, we have the patents. We have a device engineering prototype. We have some great early data. Certainly, the next step is to design and build a clinical prototype that we could actually put in the hands of end users, specifically so that we could conduct a human clinical trial for first in human testing.
Okay. And there was an article that was written about your company in IEEE that showed really positive results for bone healing. Can you explain the results and kind of what was the outcome of that paper?
Absolutely. So that was based on an animal trial that we conducted in conjunction with Thomas Jefferson University Hospital, as well as the Mayo Clinic's biomechanics lab. Thomas Jefferson in Philadelphia. I mean, they are have been at the forefront of medical ultrasound since the very beginning. That institution really helped bring that tech into the mainstream, and we effectively did a bake-off between our technology and the only FDA approved device in this space. We showed that given equivalent treatment times, that our technology resulted in 25 to 30% stronger and stiffer bone than the existing device, which is of course very exciting. That alone should be a fantastic discriminator. But in addition, we've also worked to develop a fracture healing assessment capability. It occurred to us that as long as we were irradiating the fracture with ultrasound at diagnostic levels, why not capture the echo and try to see if the bone is actually healing? That turned out to be an incredibly complex problem, just given the amount of noise that's generated when the signal hits that fracture. And that's, of course, where some of my father's deep skill sets in digital signal analysis actually came in rather handy. We did ultimately succeed in developing an algorithm that can pull the signal out of the noise and actually correlate that signal with one of the stages of fracture healing. That's going to be a game changer for this space to actually give patients the confidence to know that the device is working, and to give the physician the chance to pivot the treatment if it's not.
And so what do you envision as a next step? What's the current process at Sonogen Medical?
Well, I mean, we are absolutely working to build that prototype device for clinical testing. So we are in the process of trying to raise funds for that process. That's now a design, build, and validation phase that has to be conducted under so-called good laboratory practices. There's, as you know as well as I, the amount of documentation the FDA appropriately requires for these things is not insubstantial. So that's our next step, is to really get that clinical prototype built.
Yeah, and I mean, not to give away your secret sauce, right? I mean, in terms of business strategy that you guys have used in terms of, doing this study and positioning this article and things like that, and giving that sort of broader view of what the technology might do in your IEEE paper, I think is a pretty smart one. I think it's one that other entrepreneurs could definitely leverage, as well. I just think it's super a super smart strategy to have a peer reviewed article that's out there. Especially in IEEE for a medical device, it makes a heck of a lot of sense.
Yeah, we're excited about it. I mean, and this is, I think, a parallel to my cybersecurity days, where if the secret encryption algorithm isn't peer reviewed, then it's likely hokum. So we've seen some recent high profile examples of what happens and how easy it is for junk science to get pretty far in the investment process. And so the goal here was to create a real solid foundation, a technical peer-reviewed foundation for our technology, and see what comes of it. It's rather exciting, and it's fun to be working in a space that can really directly and clearly help people. That perhaps isn't as futile as I feel like cyber is on most days.
Well, it's funny. Because either way, I mean, I feel like you're helping things, helping people, and either way. But I can completely understand your want to be in healthcare and working on this technology. I guess in terms of your past business experiences that you've had, though, I mean, you were a founder before and a CTO before. How has that helped you now at Sonogen? To help carry things forward.
Well, there's a fantastic parallel from cybersecurity specifically into the whole founder startup process. Is that notion of de-risking a business. That's really the only thing that I'm an expert in, is risk management. I've been doing that and working in that space now for close to 30 years. And I think that is the single most important skill that a founder needs in order to move a business from the idea stage all the way through, through to market. And I think that the adage of working on the business versus in the business is very important. And so we all make some of those mistakes early on, and hopefully learn from them.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of coach people. I mean, one of the diagrams I oftentimes use is, you can have on the vertical axis everything around sort of your thought processes around the innovation that you're working on. And then on the sort of horizontal axis is all the business process that you have to be able to scale an organization. And my point of view oftentimes is that, you can get focused on one or the other too much, and then it will lead you nowhere. You can be great at innovation that will never serve the public, or you can be great at business process that will never support a company. And so you have to be kind of careful and maintain that balance somehow overall as a leader as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first things I did when we decided we are going to move ahead with Sonogen was I put together a list of a couple of hundred requirements across a variety of different spaces, including legal and technical and managerial, that all needed to be put in place in order for the thing to be properly de-risked and to move it forward. It's everything from incorporating the business and getting an employee ID number, to filing patents, to getting a DUNS number, and getting a stock incentive plan in place, and all of the myriad necessary that you need to do in order to actually have a functional business. And so the exercise over the last year and a half has been really to just work that burn down list and really just eliminate as much risk as I possibly could from the business, and try to get ahead of some of the stuff that I knew I'd need to have in place in order to get to the next stage. So it's the struggle's real, but it's also a lot of fun to see something come together.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess that leads me to the next question, which is sort of, company size and things like that oftentimes, becomes something that is a concern for certain founders as well. I know that there's some founders that have told me that, look, beyond a 5 or 10 person company, they're not really interested in being a founder any longer. I guess, what do you envision, sort of, as the company grows and things like that? I mean, you saw this probably at your cybersecurity company as well, that, as you had more and more people and complexity and things like that, I guess, what are you envisioning with regards to Sonogen?
Well, I think you need to make a strong differentiation in your mind as a founder if you have a small business or a startup. Airstone was designed as a small business. Our goal was to create a nice little company so that we could, do some great work and eat regularly and live indoors. And so, ultimately, that's worked. We've done a great job. We have a great little company. It's self-sustaining at this point. Sonogen, on the other hand, Sonogen is going public. We are carrying this all the way through IPO. Our goal is not to sell out to the first orc that buys us a meat pie. We are going to bring this device to market. We are going to help people, and we are going to apply our technology to some other really exciting spaces. We have opportunities in military battlefield care, wound healing, spinal fusion healing, even veterinary care. So the goal here is to build a world-class organization that can leverage therapeutic acoustics to actually solve a lot of very serious medical problems.
Yeah, I mean, I as an owner of Great Danes, I've had a Great Dane who broke a toe once, and so I definitely would have loved to have gone down the bone healing route rather than having a dog in a cast, which is a whole different experience to
Yep.
talk about.
No, it's absolutely interesting that that dogs actually tend to suffer injuries very similar to high performance athletes. The canine equivalent of an ACL tear, which is the cranial cruciate ligament tear, is very common. It's a very expensive surgery, and it doesn't have a great survival rate.
Mm.
It's I think only something like 70% of animals survive the surgery. And so, to be able to apply a fracture healing technology to that surgery, which actually involves actually inducing an osteotomy to re-level that ligament, is would be great. We'd actually be helping animals and helping owners as well. So very exciting stuff.
Yeah, it is excellent. And so there are three questions that I like to ask every guest, Jason. What inspires you?
Oh man. Well, I love a challenge, as probably apparent by now. I am absolutely in my element when I'm learning, and working to bring ideas to life. I can't stand the armchair. I really like just rolling up my sleeves and getting out there and doing something. So that's it's fun for me.
Well, you've definitely found the right place. I mean, given kind of, at least what I'm hearing is that we won't potentially see Sonogen do just one thing in the market. We honestly will probably see you, reach even further and, continue things forward. So it sounds to me
Here's
like you're in the right place to be able to do that.
here's to hoping, man.
Yeah. What concerns you?
What concerns me? Well, obviously, you can just turn on the news today and find a lot to be concerned about. But I am most concerned about what I would call the big, scary, underfunded problems. These are the problems that are going to have a massive, damaging effect to the world, which are absolutely coming like a freight train and just aren't getting the funding that they need.
Mm,
I've been blathering on about that for several years now, and I've always included global pandemic preparation on that list. That's, I think, hopefully self-evident to everyone now. But there are others, things like artificial intelligence, global climate change, access to clean water. These are just incredibly dangerous problems that just unfortunately are not getting the actual research funding that I think they need in order to reach positive outcomes.
yeah, and I know definitely in our space. I mean, I've routinely said that, you know, I I've had a few individuals that we both know that are working on crucial things and they're struggling to get funding, and you continue to see this happen, and then you wonder, how long can they make it? Can they appropriately make it? To the next step, right? I mean, the valley of death, as we know, is not one valley of death; it's multiple. And so most companies are having to sort of fight this fight, get funding, make sure that they make it over the next hump and kind of continue forward. And, it just in our space, I can continue to see that. And, I think in a broader sense, all the things that you said, I mean, it just seems like there are so many things to work on. But oftentimes, the things that are getting funding a lot of times are the shiny thing that most people would apply funding for. I know I'm seeing a fair amount of funding in next generation sequencing, a fair amount of funding in just continuing to build better and better AI models in different aspects. But there's a lot to be done, and I know that there's limited dollars, but at the same time, it seems like having funding to work on key medicines or things that will essentially prepare us for the next pandemic makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's absolutely true, and we got to tackle that problem from multiple angles. On the education side, on the ROI expected time horizon side. Unfortunately, we tend to be rather short term in our outlook, and it really makes it difficult to for some of these technologies to actually see the light of day when when the payload might be 4, 5, even 10 years out. So it's
Yeah.
we're gonna have to change a few things if we want to remain competitive and keep this planet operating under we'll call them hospitable conditions.
Sure. Yeah, and I think, I mean, I just think, again, to go back to Sonogen Medical for a second again, I mean, just kind of, where you guys currently are in terms of, um, you know, getting funding and looking to continue to grow the company and things like that. Honestly, sounds like you're in a decent spot, but at the same time, as I said, there's a lot to be done. You guys have already carried a lot on your own shoulders, right? From 2017 until, recently. But yeah, I mean, there's still a lot to be done before you're out in the market and moving
Oh,
forward.
absolutely, and it's funding sort of beyond the scope of what we call friends and family funding. The way that this works for us is if we get some angels or venture investment firms excited enough in us to invest the 10 million we're going to need in order to get all the way through human clinicals, which is a not insubstantial amount of money. So even with all the de-risking in the world, there's still the time horizon and the what I feel are sometimes unrealistic internal rate of return targets. And we're just going to have to plug away at it and hope we find some investors that are able to see the excitement and believe in us. And it's not a problem unique to us. There are 1,000 companies that are having these same discussions right at this very minute all over America. And I think just as a question of national competitiveness, I do think we need to do more to try to get these companies just somehow moving and on their way. And I think there are some concrete changes we could make there that maybe we need to reserve for another podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And what excites you?
What excites me? I love just applying scientific discovery to real world problems. Just like we've been talking, there's always been a huge gap there. We have this massive backlog of ideas, and I just think we need to do a better job of aligning funding to opportunity for the highest impact, and figuring out some way to, really help industry de-risk some of these investments through peer review and through vetting processes. I think it's a place where the government could step in, not for the funding, but to really help with that de-risking process. And I think there's more we can do also just to encourage STEM education so that we get more people up through the process and up through the schooling and get people to work, on some of these challenges. Hopefully that starts moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think, at least in terms of some of the things that I'm seeing, just with regards to STEM and, the exciting, sort of growth that they're seeing overall, just kind of around the U.S., it has been phenomenal. We're seeing more and more, women enter science, but also, just more and more diverse populations enter scientific population, which is helpful for all of us because, again, to go back to clinical trials, I mean, we oftentimes talk about having decentralized, diverse clinical trials. And, the best way to do that is to have people constantly thinking about these populations and how do we bring them in, especially if they don't have the same access to tools and locations like other places have. And so, a first world problem, definitely for all of us to solve, and having, more people in the space that use scientific methods to solve problems is a great thing to have.
Yeah, concur. And teaching that scientific method to try to get people to perhaps be a little bit more discriminating in their in their thinking and in their adoption of ideas, and being able to tell fact from fiction out in the news and elsewhere. I think all that will have a fantastic
Yeah.
improvement. It's so I haven't really I don't really have a good sense of how well scientific method is being taught in schools these days. And however it's being taught, my suspicion is they need to do a better job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because I oftentimes, I mean, I used to do this with my kids whenever they were home. We would often have these Q&A sessions where, I would try my best to play dumb, and continually just ask questions and, not have the answers, and just continue to sort of question why do we think this happens? Why do we think, a particular, scientific principle might be happening, so that we go beyond even, what's in the books, and is available. But I I frequently would say to the educators as well of my kids, and my kids are all grown at this point, this idea of, teaching people how to question is a critical skill, a much more critical skill than having the answer. Having the answer, is part of, what we should be seeking through the questioning process. But I feel like we don't do enough of that. And it leads oftentimes to people to, just accept answers that aren't really answers. And so I kind of, just wonder if there couldn't just be more time spent teaching kids to ask good questions, and understanding the questioning process a little bit better.
Yeah, and I don't think we can put this on parents. I think it's unrealistic to imagine that every parent in the country is going to have a functional command of the Socratic method.
Sure.
I feel like that's something that our school system really needs to address, even as they encourage more STEM adoption and encourage just really critical thinking in general. I feel like that there's more that needs to be done there, and the fact that higher education is just financially out of reach of so many still today. I have a good friend whose daughter just got into one of the premier private universities in Tokyo. One of I think it's the oldest university in the country, and the tuition there is about $10,000 a year. You just compare that with these astronomical tuitions, 50, 60, 75K a year at some of our better schools, and it's just unrealistic to imagine that every worthy child is going to have access to that kind of backing. So we've got to do better.
Absolutely. Well, Jason Winder, thank you so much for spending time with me today on the Life Science Success Podcast. I greatly appreciate it. And I also enjoyed hearing much more about bone healing and all the work that you're doing at Sonogen. So thank you.
That was my great pleasure, Don Davis. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it. And last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.